Welcome to the Jim Acosta Show, and it's another day that ends in Y and the turmoil unleashed by Donald Trump in the Middle East and the affordability crisis in America that is now being exacerbated by the war against Iran. Oil prices are soaring. We'll talk about that, and there is no end in sight to the war itself. Let's discuss with retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, who is out with a new book. We should show this to the viewers. It's entitled "If I Don't Return." And Mark, good to see you. And for the audience at home that realizes, yes, I'm not in D.C., I'm actually out west. I'm at a higher elevation. So if I get short of breath using my podcaster voice here, Mark, you'll have to forgive me. But good to see you.
Good to see you too, Jim. And you're in cold Utah, and I am in extremely hot Orlando, Florida. It's 88 degrees right now here. So we've got the extremes of the temperature for sure.
No question about it. We got our bases covered. And Duke's in the background too. So anything could happen. During this podcast, Mark, but great to see you as always. I guess we should just jump right into this. You and I haven't spoken in a while. I guess it's not that big of a surprise that Donald Trump would do this in the Middle East and go after Iran in this fashion. He's talked about this for a long time, and I guess he's made good on that talk. The problem, though, is that it has unleashed the law of unintended consequences. I mean, oil is soaring. It's around $90 a barrel. That's going to cause problems for people back home as they go to the gas station. But I mean, we're also seeing, Israel unload on Lebanon. We're seeing the United States unload on Iran, and civilian casualties obviously are soaring at this point. Some American casualties. But I guess just to get us started, what's been your sense of all of this, just watching this? Because I mean, this really has the potential to spiral in a bad way.
Yeah, you use the term unintended consequences, Jim, and I think that's the one that accurately describes what happens when you go to war against a big country. Even if you have, a capable military, which we very much do, an effective military to conduct operations. But there's a couple things that have been bothering me about this. The first is, and it's received a whole lot of attention in DC, the different mission sets that we've seen over the last 6 days. What exactly are we trying to do? Which points to a lack of strategy. The other thing is how do you take the strategic vision from the civilian leaders of the government and employ it into a military campaign plan? Now, we saw Admiral Brad Cooper on TV yesterday giving a press conference along with Secretary Hegseth. Early in the week, we saw the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he's done a phenomenal job of Dan Kane in terms of being very professional and very succinct and outlining the military operations. But, what I just keep coming back to, having been the recipient of civilian orders in the past and having to shape a campaign plan, is when you get the changes in mission sets that these two individuals have been given, the so-called shifting end states of, let's go through them: regime change, regime decapitation, destroy the nuclear program, destroy the missile capability, neutralize proxy forces in the region, cripple the naval capability. Each one of those objectives from a military standpoint requires different scale, different time horizons, different force resources, the amount of forces you have on the ground, commitment, and conflating these as potentially being just a mission that might change every once in a while causes some major challenges. You're showing right now on the screen I think it was the bombing of Tehran yesterday by Israeli forces. And I've seen maps from the Institute of the Study of War that says the number of targets that have been hit inside of Tehran is just mind-boggling. There are literally hundreds. So when you're striking the so-called military targets and trying to, destroy the capability or counter the capability, I got to tell you, there's always collateral damage among civilians. And you're talking about a large city that is now in turmoil. I'm sorry, I'm rambling on a little bit.
No, you're doing great.
But there's so many things to talk about. One of the other things, I just wrote an article about this for the Bulwark, which has to do with the president the mantra that seems to be going around the Beltway that he's comfortable with using military forces. And what I'd say to any civilian leader who's comfortable using them, that doesn't necessarily mean you're using them in the right way. It's just that you're employing them. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure I want my civilian leaders to be all that comfortable when they send men and women into harm's way. So that's the last thing I'll say, and we can kind of jump off from there.
No question about it. I mean, it sounds like he's a little too comfortable
Right.
using military forces. And I mean, he's already taken out the leadership in Venezuela and Maduro. Of course, we're striking Iran now. He's talking about Cuba. But you mentioned the civilian toll in Iran. I mean, this is according to the Associated Press. The evidence now does suggest that the deadly blast at an Iranian elementary school was likely a U.S. airstrike. This happened on February 28th, produced the highest reported civilian death toll since the war began. And about 1,230 people have already died in Iran, 200 in Lebanon, and of course, the 6 U.S. soldiers. But Mark, one thing that I think we have to talk about is, I mean, if you want to talk about how Trump has been a little too casual about this, I mean, there are his comments that he's been making lately about that's the way it is when it comes to soldiers who die in military conflict. But he also was talking to Time Magazine. This is the last day or so. We can put this up on screen if we have it. He tells Time Magazine, I guess there could be retaliatory attacks in the United States. And he says, quote, but I think they're worried about that all the time. We think about it all the time. We plan for it. But yeah, you know, we expect some things. Like I said, some people will die. And when you go to war, some people will die. Your thoughts on the way he's been communicating on all of this?
Well, I'll talk about the first piece of that commentary, about, I guess there could be attacks in the United States. It's interesting to me, having recently spoken to several FBI agents that who are in the cyber realm of the FBI. They say that their capability has been really somewhat, I don't want to use the word gutted, but it's declined. Let's put it that way. The ability to figure out cyber. And the guys were telling me that it also is affecting other elements within the FBI. So when you're talking about the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security being the key agencies that prevent any kind of homeland terror, both of those organizations have been in a little bit of churn lately, and that's saying it's kindly. We've just seen the DHS secretary replaced yesterday because of some bad actions on her part. We don't know what that's done inside the agency. I would suspect morale isn't that great in either the FBI or the DHS. I'm not saying it is or isn't. I'm just suspecting that I know how I would feel if I was working there. And those are the two agencies that protect the homeland from terror attack. The other thing I'd say is just, I don't know if the president was answering a question on this, but to imply that, he would take care of it, that concerns me too, because in terms of potentially stoking an attack in the homeland could contribute potentially to what might happen as we approach election day with troops on the street, and kind of the desire that the president has had to have more military focus in the streets of America, which he's repeated multiple times.
Yeah, and Mark, about what the potential might be with Russia. The Associated Press is also reporting that Russia has provided Iran with information that could help Tehran strike American warships, aircraft, and other assets in the region. This is according to two officials familiar with the intelligence and all this, talking to the Associated Press. But I think there's a real potential here for, going back to unintended consequences. I mean, just as the U.S. has been helping the Ukrainians fight the Russians, I suppose over at the Kremlin, they're probably thinking, why not help the Iranians strike back at the U.S.? And that could have major consequences for assets in the region.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only within the region, but also in Europe, as you just pointed out. I mean, this is going to be spreading, Jim. That's another concern I have. You can't limit, when you go to war, you can't limit the kinetic capability of your enemy. And when you're dealing with a state like Iran, they are going to strike out. And when you have the Russian Federation supporting them and being partners with them, as they have been, as Iran has provided Russia with so many Shahed drones over the last 4 years. This is Russia's payback to them. They're going to give them some intelligence. And we all know that Russia's intelligence capability is pretty damn good. And Iran is not in terms of the region. So if there's even the potential for a coordination between Iran and Russia, it could be problematic for U.S. forces and other Gulf countries in the region.
Yeah, and this is how the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt reacted to that. We should play this because, I mean, they're very blasé about this being a problem. I think this could be a major problem. Let's listen to this. We have it.
Me. I wanted to start you off this afternoon because we have confirmed reports from U.S. officials that Russia is providing intelligence to Iran to help it target U.S. assets in the region. I'm sure this is something that does not please the president whatsoever. Has he spoken to Putin about it?
Well, look, I'll leave that to the president to answer himself. But what I will tell you, John, we don't comment on intelligence reports that are leaked to the press. Whether or not this happened, frankly, it does not really matter because President Trump and the United States military are absolutely decimating the rogue Iranian terrorist regime.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
wow.
Mark, your thoughts on that?
I had not heard that, Jim, and that's just simply shocking. I mean, it is. It's beyond blasé or hand waving. This is, there are so many security violations inside the current administration. And for the press secretary to say something as offensive as that, hey, we don't care. And this is another problem I have being a former military guy. They are using the military as a shield because they are performing so well in the operational campaign that nothing else matters. Do you have a strategy? No, we don't need one because the military is doing great. Do you worried about Russia? No, because we're completely decimating the Iranians. Are you worried about the economy? No, because this is going to be over quickly. I mean, it is that repeated mantra, Jim, that is just so offensive to anyone who works in national security and knows how this works.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, the way that you call it the civilian leadership, the way they've been commenting on all of this has been pretty distressing. I mean, the secretary he calls himself the Secretary of War, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, the way he was speaking to the press the other day. I mean, first of all, the briefing room is full of, I call them MAGA ringers. They're basically sycophantic outlets that are loyal to Donald Trump. It's not like having the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Military Times, Stars and Stripes, CNN, MSNBC, those kinds of folks in there. And he still has to say, well, the way you guys are reporting on U.S. casualties, you're doing this to make Donald Trump look bad. And I just, how is that a message to be sending to the American people in this moment? It seems to me. It's just, when I heard that, I just thought, I get who Pete Hegseth is, but does he have to say that? Like, come on.
Well, and Secretary of Defense Hegseth, that I will call him, pointed around the room the other day and used the term fake news. Yeah. And for a Secretary of Defense to be doing something like that, to basically be, there are a couple of people that are mentioned by name in the Constitution of the United States. One is the Army, and the other one's the free press. And if you don't like what they're reporting, give them a better story in terms of what you're doing. Don't just call them fake news and think that you shouldn't inform the American people. I'll be honest with you, Jim. During the various times I was in combat, the media was a pain in the ass.
Of course.
At times. And that's their job, to be my pain in the ass, because I need to inform, and so do they, the American public. And that's what the important part is. I know Tom Schenker, the New York Times. He was embedded with us in Iraq, and after he was embedded for a very long period of time, he and I wrote an article together called the military media relationship, a dysfunctional marriage, but we stay together for the kids. And the kids in both of our cases are the American public and our soldiers we protect. And if you just go around calling people fake news because you don't want to tell them what's going on, that's an abomination in my view.
Yeah. And for the folks at home who haven't seen it, let's play it and talk about it on the other side, because I want to just ask you one more thing on this. If we can play it full screen too, that'd be great.
Taking control of Iran's airspace and waterways without boots on the ground. We control their fate. But when a few drones get through, or tragic things happen, it's front page news. I get it. The press only wants to make the president look bad, but try for once to report the reality. The terms of this war will be set by us at every step.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Mark, it makes me wonder, are they going to be able to withstand scrutiny if this grinds on? And I think back to what happened during Iraq and the Iraq War, and how, that was a long engagement that, it had so many unintended consequences, and it really was so hard on so many military families in the US. And it got to a point where the press just had to show what was happening. And, there was a moment in the beginning of all of it when I know the Bush folks were pretty steamed at the press, but then I think at some point they just had to throw their hands up because they realized what a mess things had become. But
Right.
To me, reality is reality. How do you not report on reality? And if this thing grinds on, this could be a real problem if they can't just take regular press criticism and scrutiny.
I think it's already showing signs of having some real problems, Jim. And the scrutiny part of what you're saying is exactly right.
Yeah.
And that scrutiny, by the way, contributed to Secretary Noem being relieved yesterday.
Well, that's true.
After a long period of time. And if Secretary Hegseth continues to say, we've got complete control of that, first of all, I would say any defense secretary or military guy that says we have complete control, they haven't studied warfare. You never have complete control. It is controlled chaos, and it often gets out of hand. So any civilian secretary who's spent maybe a couple of months in combat, who claims that he's got complete control because of what we're seeing on the screen of a lot of kinetic activity, well, one of the things I'll say in those press conferences, it's all about what we're doing. There was no statement of what Iran was doing, and they had some pretty good successes during the first couple of days of this conflict.
Right.
Now it's winding down to a degree in terms of their capability, but there's always that surprise. That's what Clausewitz tells us. I hate to get geeky here, but Clausewitz says, be ready for the surprises and be ready for the friction and the fog of war. And I think we're going to experience that probably soon. I hate to be a pessimist, but I've been in too much combat to realize nothing ever goes clean.
Right. And one of the things that will not be clean about this, and we can talk about this, and I definitely want to get to the book in a moment, but getting back to Russia and Ukraine, one of the things that the Ukrainians learned was the value of asymmetrical warfare and the innovation of using drones and that sort of thing. It really did level the battlefield for them with the Russians. And it seems to me that the Iranians may just try to do the same exact thing. The 6 U.S. soldiers who were killed were apparently killed by a drone.
Right.
And irony of all ironies, apparently the U.S., the administration is going to the Ukrainians and saying, hey, help us out with some of this drone technology. We could really use your help, which maybe J.D. Vance will thank Zelensky about that. But remember that whole thing. But this could be something. This is part of the deal. If you let the genie out of the bottle, if you open up Pandora's box, this can happen.
Yeah. And, you bring up the Zelensky piece. I think that is critical to talk about as well, because we have taken our eye completely off the Ukrainian ball over the last 8 months or so because of Venezuela and Greenland and the Epstein files, and now Iran. The interesting things to me is we have thwarted all of our allies, Jim. And as you know, I'm a big believer in alliances and security alliances, especially. Who is with us right now? There are some marginal folks that are saying, yeah, we'll help out a little bit. But when we used to go to war, we could count on a whole lot of allies going with us if we had a good strategy and if they understood it. I'm not seeing that right now. There are some Gulf cooperation countries that are doing that, the GCC, but how much are they providing? What is happening other than our shared sorties with Israel? I don't see a whole lot other than them defending themselves against errant missile launches using our equipment in many places.
Yeah. Well, and part of the problem, though, isn't it, General, is that we don't know why we're at war. Do you think, General, that we have heard a a solid rationale for why we're even doing this?
No, it's been an ever-changing series of rationales by different people. Jim, one of my all-time favorite movies is Drumline. I don't know if you've ever heard that. And there's a
Sure.
line or seen that, but there's a line in there that says one band, one sound. We have not seen one band, one sound out of the administration. Every single secretary has said something different. And usually when they say it, the president will counter it that night and say something else. So yeah, it's confusing the allies. They are trying to be nice, but they see it. I mean, I was watching Chancellor Merz in the Oval Office the other day. The body language was telling everything. I don't know if you watched that. But
I saw some of that, yes.
Having been in Germany for 12 years of my career, you could kind of tell what was going through his mind of, oh my gosh, what kind of partnership do we have with these people right now? And it's not very good.
It's not very good at all. And, I mean, that's a problem that could, come back and bite us years from now.
Absolutely.
It seems to me, and I know you have a lot of conversations with folks overseas across the pond in Europe, where all the Western democracies are that are supposed to be our best allies. And I think they've just sort of thrown up their hands and they don't know what to do now. I mean, the whole situation with Greenland, I mean, that really pissed them off, frankly.
Yep.
And I think it was the fact that they finally showed that they were pissed off that got Trump to back off of that idea. And I just wonder if something really serious were to happen to the U.S., what would happen then? I mean, 9/11, we had the world behind us because it was an unprovoked attack and the United States had to respond and the world was with us. If something happens to us this time around, I imagine there are going to be some folks around the world who are going to say, well, didn't you kind of bring this on yourselves because of Donald Trump's behavior? You put him back in office. We told you not to put him back in office, and you went and did it anyway. He's spreading this chaos around the world. Chaos can have consequences.
I absolutely agree with you, Jim. I think there are going to be some people, and most of the Europeans won't say it, but they'll be thinking it.
Yes.
You deserve this. You did this to yourself. And that's, I think most of them are. I know. I mean, I hope they don't think that way, but I'm sure they do in many cases, because they've seen how we have not reined this individual in from doing the kinds of things that don't represent the way America feels. When you take a look at the polling, and I'm not a big pollster or anything, but I look at them, no one wanted this.
Nobody wanted.
They saw how dangerous this was, other than the rabid defenders of the president. And again, if you can't give a strategy for why you're doing something that puts Americans in harm's way, it's boggling. It is mind-boggling.
Well, let's talk about the book. Everybody who's watching right now, you got to go out and get General Hertling's book. It's called If I Don't Return. And I can't wait to pick it up and dive into it. You've had such an incredible military career. You've learned so many great lessons over the years. I imagine that the book is packed with a lot of those lessons. And I know how writing a book is. You probably wish there was stuff in there that you couldn't get in there and got cut on the cutting room floor and so on. But just wax poetic for us for a moment and tell us, why'd you write the book and what do you want people to get away from it?
Well, this book, a quick, long story. I'll try and be as short as I can, Jim. But this book was a result of something our son did to me. I had a journal. In fact, it's right here. This was the original journal that I kept during Desert Storm in an Army record book with a lot of notes. And before we deployed to Desert Storm in 1990, Desert Shield in 1990, and then into Desert Storm, we were surprised by the deployment. A lot of people don't know this history, but at the time, Saddam's army was the fourth largest in the world. They had just gotten off of an 8-year war with Iran. They were battle hardened. He had used chemical weapons against his own citizens in Halabja in the Kurdish region. And when we were told we were going, the second day after we were notified, we were pulled into a intelligence briefing, and the intelligence officer said, the 1-1 Cav, the 1st Cavalry Squadron, which I was in, the reconnaissance element of the division, is likely going to suffer 50% casualties. Now, that seems absurd when you think about what happened later in Desert Storm, how it was a quick and almost sanitized war. But we went into it thinking we were going to suffer 50% casualties. So when I saw that we might have a coin flip chance of returning home, and the fact that I had a 7 and a 10-year-old son, what I wanted to do was leave a journal for them that would teach them how to be men. So it addresses all kinds of issues from the beginning. And when I went home, they were then 8 and 11 when I redeployed home, and they didn't want to look at any journal that had the waxing thoughts of their old man.
Yeah.
So I threw it into a Foot Locker, and it was recovered a couple of years ago by our youngest son, who had, both of our sons have had multiple tours in Iraq, so they are now combat veterans themselves.
Wow.
And our youngest son took it out and typed it up, unbeknownst to me. And Christmas morning in 2024, when all the grandkids were opened their presents and were off playing and everything, and he just came up to me and said, "Dad, this one's just for you." And I wanted to wait for everybody else to be out of the room. And it was the typed journal. And he said, "My brother and I realized what you were trying to do by telling us about life and leadership and emotions and values, and then a little bit about the combat as well." He said, "We realized what you were trying to do. You were trying to prepare us in case you didn't come home." And he said, "That was great of you to do that. But now you have to take that book and expand it and write to your 5 grandsons and 2 granddaughters and give them more lessons of life." So it was actually, Jim, a very easy book to write, because I told the people that were editing it, don't touch any of the journal entries. So there's misspellings and syntax, but the reflections after each one of those on the same subjects are what I learned over the next 35 years, going back into combat multiple times and making new friends and going into different careers. There's a whole chapter on CNN in there and the media.
Wow.
And and hospitals and teaching at a grad school, which I do now. So it's my publisher says it's not a war book. It's kind of a leadership book, values book, culture book, and reflections of the life lived. And truly, the last thing I'll say, Jim, I've never wanted to write a leadership book like, here was my life, because I've seen too many leadership books that just beat their chest and all that. So this book also has a whole lot of failures and foibles and things that I made mistakes with, but it's mostly about what I learned about friendship and leadership and culture and all those kind of things.
Well, a couple of questions come to mind when I hear you talk about this. One is, when you talk about parenting and being a father and being a dad to young men, I think about, and it's been a subject on my show for some time now, the crisis that we have, or I guess maybe, I don't know if we call it a crisis, but a problem that we have with young men in this country.
Right.
And are we raising them right? How are we preparing them for this world? Are we just letting them be on their phones to learn all the wrong things about life itself? And I guess, what are some of your parenting, fatherhood?
Oh gosh,
that I've is there a Hertlingism that you would boil it down to a couple of things?
No, I mean, you got to love, first of all. You got to love, and you got to teach, and you've got to discipline. And one of the things that is at the end, I actually did a podcast yesterday with a guy who's doing a podcast called Raising Men. And he's a dad who has 2 young kids, and he wants a bunch of people to tell him these stories. The last chapter of the book, Jim, is a reflection on a thing that Sue and I, my wife and I, have had on our wall since the kids were born, since our 2 boys were born. And now both of them as fathers have the same thing on their wall. And I'd suggest you and your listeners Google it. It's called MacArthur's Prayer. And I'm not a big Douglas MacArthur fan, although he was a great military leader, but he wrote a prayer that basically starts off, "Give me a son, O Lord, who does these things." And I take the entire last chapter of the book and take that prayer and dissect every line of it as kind of a guidepost for parents and what they should look for in their children and how they can help them become that. So that's my favorite chapter. Every time I read it, I get emotional. And every time I walk into one of our two sons' houses and see that same prayer on their wall, MacArthur's prayer for his sons, it kind of chokes me up a little bit.
Oh, I'm gonna have to check that out. That's terrific. And on leadership, I mean, my goodness, I feel like we could use a Mark Hertling leadership clinic in Washington, D.C. these days. I don't mean to bring it back to the president. I don't want to ruin the conversation bringing him up again, but I just worry about the lessons that are being taught now with his very selfish, narcissistic, self-absorbed leadership style.
Yeah.
It just seems to be all about him, even when it comes to what's happening in the Middle East right now. And I tell my son, I try to say on this show to younger viewers, this is, I've had young guests on the show who've basically said the only president they ever really remember is Donald Trump in their lifetime, which makes
my gosh,
mind blow up. But, I always go back to JFK's profiles and courage. I mean, there is more to leadership than what we are seeing right now.
Profiles and Courage is back there on my shelf.
I love it. Yeah.
And what I think you're talking to, and it's what I teach in strategic leadership to a bunch of MBA students and what I've taught doctors, is it really has a model of your character, who you are, which is based on your background and your values and what you grew up with, and then your presence of who other people see in you. And when that character and who you are is kind of overlapped with who other people see in you, that usually makes for a good leader, along with the intellectual capacity and their ability to teach and train others, and to pay attention to constant self-analysis of themselves, to be better every day. And then finally, to make things happen, all combined to help you influence others to do the right thing. Marty Dempsey, who always gave me a great line. I mean, it was a mantra of his of show people what right looks like. And if you can do that as a leader, and you really represent it in your values and your character, then the people around you will catch on to it too, and take that with them and build the bench for the future. And you're right, we're not seeing that right now. We're seeing the people with a lot of swagger who want to spike the football, who want to blame other people. And that's not leadership at all. Not even close.
Not even close. Well, the book is If I Don't Return, and it's written by the great retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, U.S. Army. And I hope we can get you back as soon as possible. I know you're very busy with the book tour and everything, but would love to get you back and keep this conversation going, because I think it's such an important conversation. I just want the guys out there to start paying more attention to what's right, in front of their nose. And that to me is it's part of the whole ball game here. It seems to me a big part of it, but really appreciate the time.
Jim, it's always a pleasure to be with you. You're a dear friend and a great journalist. So thanks for all you're doing and keeping the message going.
Will do. Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark. You always tell me to call you Mark, and I feel my mother raised me right not to call a general by his first name, but you've scolded me many times to say Mark. So thank you, Mark.
I did. All right. Thanks, Jim.
Good to see
you. Have a good
sir.
time skiing too.
I will. I'm going to try not to hurt myself. And Duke too. He's back here too. Thanks.
Okay.
Good to see
you.
you.
All right. Take care, man.
Appreciate it. I know for the folks who tuned in late, yes, I am in different settings here. And I really appreciate having Mark Hertling part of this conversation. He's such a great guy and has so many wonderful lessons to talk about in life. And you probably saw at one point the light was coming in, and that was because he was squawking and whining, and he wanted to go outside and go look around outside. He's a beagle. This is what beagles do. He's an attention addict. But there's a lot of other important news happening right now. And I mean, one of the most important stories, and you guys, we've talked about this on the show many times, is the Epstein files. I've said it over and over, and I'll say it again. We're like a pit bull on steroids. We've clamped down on the Epstein files. We're not going to let that story go. And somebody who's clamped down on it more than I have, and has become really an expert in all of this, is our friend Ellie Leonard. I want to bring her back in. Ellie, it's great to see you. And
good to see you too.
I see that you sent a little note saying this will be relevant to the
Yes.
conversation. So we need to get into that too. So
Yes.
I'll pull that up at some point and hopefully not blow up the link here. But one reason why I wanted to reach out to you is because there has been this story in the news for what, the better part of a week. This was a story before Trump started a war in the Middle East, that there were documents that were in the Epstein files. There was stuff in the Epstein files that then got pulled out of the Epstein files, and they pertain to allegations regarding Donald Trump and a very young underage minor back in the 80s. And now those documents have reappeared, and we can now see what they say. And Ellie, my understanding is, and if I'm characterizing it wrong, feel free to knock me over the head and correct me, but this appears to be the interview or excerpts from the interview with the person who made this allegation, I guess, back in 2019, talking about events that she said occurred back in the 80s. But what do you think is the significance? And we should note on page 8 in all of this, there's a part where it says that that she bit him, I believe, in the penis, I think is what she said, what she alleges. This is what it says here. Trump mentioned something to the effect of, "Let me teach you how little girls are supposed to be." Trump unzipped his pants, put head down to his penis, and then she bit the shit out of it. This is according to, and I'm sorry for the graphic language here, but this is what is now in the Epstein files, has been released to the public. The Justice Department, I guess, put out a statement saying Trump's been exonerated. I'm going on too long and setting this up. But Ellie, your thoughts on this? I think it's a big, explosive story.
Yeah.
To me, the more Trump tries to knock it down, makes it more of a story.
I just think it's incredible journalism by the folks at NPR, because they discovered that these were missing, and they did it based on kind of like a mathematical algorithm. It wasn't, because I had reached out to them asking if they at least knew the file numbers, if that's how they figured it out, that there were missing file numbers that they knew, and they said, no, we don't even have those. It was like the specific search tool that they had used. And so we knew that there were 53 missing pages, and we knew that they specifically had to do with Donald Trump. So, lo and behold, we now have 16 of them. We're still missing 37. But the significance of this is they, if you think about somebody coming forward with an allegation, there are steps between having an allegation and getting a first interview with the FBI. We don't often get that far based on how credible they think our stories are. So the fact that they interviewed this woman 4 times lends a lot of credibility to our story. But the biggest interview, which is either takes place between the second and the fourth one that we have, because we have one that took place while Epstein was still in jail but alive. We have one that I believe right after he died, and then we have one in October. So one either took place in between those last 2, or one took place much more recently. But they interviewed her 4 times, right? They interviewed the same woman 4 times, and her story is so, it's different in ways. I try not to get stuck on MOs and the way that Epstein would do things, but it's so much earlier than the other stories. And so there are significant details that are very, very unique to the story that would be really hard to create, if you're honest with, they would be really hard to just make up these things, specific things about, she was a little bit more naive. She was worried her mom was going to get mad because she pierced her ear. She went to a Rick James concert. You can Google and see if there was a Rick James concert there at that time, and there was. It's just a very, very significant piece of information.
Yeah, and Ellie, it's very detailed. There's lots of detail in this, as you're saying. So for this woman in 2019 to concoct this story in this elaborate detail, to me, that just doesn't add up to me. And and the fact that these documents disappeared and now they've reemerged. How much has this been going on since the files have been released? And I guess, as you said, we're still missing a lot,
right?
Tons of documents.
And I said this to Wajahat Ali the other day.
Yeah.
I think last night, actually. If you or I were documented by the DOJ for 30 years, and they had 3.5 million files on us, and we had a best friend during that time for 15 of those years that we socialized with, combined finances with, bought modeling companies with, and they didn't show up in those 3.5 million files, that best friend of 15 years, that would be significant. That wouldn't exist. And so the fact that we don't see Trump very much in these files is significant. I mean, there's no way for him not to be there, but also be a best friend for, almost 2 decades.
Right, exactly. And I mean, he's mentioned in the files,
Mhm.
I believe tens of thousands of times. Let's talk about this story in the Post and Courier.
Yes.
This is a South Carolina publication for folks who don't know the Post and
Okay.
Courier. And it says, the headline is Hilton Head, the teen ventured to a vacation home on the South Carolina Sea Island, arriving for a babysitting gig, as she commonly did for tourists who rented property from her mother, but she found no young children to look after, according to accusations contained in a legal filing decades later. Instead, she encountered a young financier from New York City. During the evening, he plied her with booze and drugs, and later that night, she said he raped her, initiating a pattern of abuse that spanned years and crossed state lines. It was 1984. She was 13. He was Jeffrey Epstein. Tell us about this story. The allegations, it says, came to light in a 2019 federal lawsuit she filed against the Epstein estate. She sued under the pseudonym Jane Doe 4. There are Jane Does that are part of this Epstein saga, right? I mean, and it sounds as though this woman is one of them, and talking about things that happened. And we should note the Trump stuff; those allegations pertain back to the 80s, and so does this. And so the 80s is an important time frame in all of this.
So here's the significance of this. This actually was given to me while I was watching you with the previous guest. This is the power of this idea of crowdsourcing information. So while we were digging through these files from last night, someone taught me how to copy paste pieces of PDFs and write over with them with different fonts to see which fits. And you start to figure out what words fit behind the redactions. And so what I did is I knew she drove home to an island from this concert in Savannah, Georgia. So I went, okay, what islands could she drive to from Savannah, Georgia, and get there by the evening? And there's only so many. And I started to plop those islands in behind the redaction to see what fit with the font, what didn't slide anything over. And the only one that fit was Hilton Head. And so I posted that in my group chat on Signal with all these folks who are out there searching for information. And someone came back to me with this article about the girl from Hilton Head in 1984. And so this, I am in my heart of hearts, this is likely the same person from these interviews.
It's incredible. And I mean, it just goes to show you how long the abuse was going on.
Yes.
And if only he had been stopped, decades ago, the damage the damage that he did by, putting together this network of guys around the world who got their kicks off of abusing young girls. I mean, maybe it would have been stopped years ago.
Right.
And then I guess just to get back to the story of this Trump accuser, I'm looking at Julie K. Brown's Substack and all of this. I mean, to me, the White House says, the files exonerate Donald Trump. And the White House, I guess, put out a statement. This is in Julie's piece. They say that the victim is sadly a disturbed woman who has an extensive criminal history. Somebody who has an extensive criminal history could be telling the truth. We don't know.
Right.
But how can how can the U.S. Justice Department say, and how can Trump say that he's been exonerated? That just, that is not something the Justice Department should be saying. Donald Trump can go out there and say, he can say whatever he wants. He lies all the time. But for the Justice Department to say he's been exonerated, based on what?
Well, I mean,
what have we seen?
Somebody with an extensive criminal history can't tell the truth is probably not something that they should be saying, because they have a president who has an extensive criminal history and doesn't often tell the truth. In this conversation, she's very honest about her history. She's honest about her mother's history, which is how she partially got wrapped up in this. Her mother was dating a man named Jim Atkins. We're still trying to track down who that is. But they basically found out that she'd had pictures taken of her, and her mother tried to get the pictures taken back and supposedly was willing to do things in order to get those pictures back, and then ended up going to jail for those things. And In the last interview, which I believe is the shortest one from October, she is very wary about coming forward because she's not really asking for anything. She's just saying, like, if I come and I tell you these things, I need to know that the things that I've, the petty crimes that I've gotten in trouble for in the past, I'm not going to get in trouble for them again. I want to just tell you these things despite that other information. And so they knew it. They knew it up front what her criminal history was. She, as with many abused women, had a lot of trouble later in life. She was harmed and she was traumatized, and it led to other things going wrong in her life. And so I think they looked past that and they just wanted to hear about these specific details. But she was very open and honest about it.
No, I mean, it seems like she was extremely open and honest about this. And I guess, I mean, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is where this goes from here. Where do you think this goes from here, Ellie? I mean, what's your sense of? I mean, I had one of the survivors on just a few days ago, Danny Bensky, and I mean, one of the things that she talks about is how they can't get these stories on conservative media.
Right.
And it's a big problem. They can't get their stories told on Fox News. And if you go and watch what Fox has been saying about it, they almost mock these victims. I mean, people like Greg Gutfeld, who is repugnant, they go about mocking these people and mocking what they've been through. And it seems to me there has to be a way to get this into conservative media, to get these cowards to start covering this stuff. Because what it says to me is that they're just afraid of getting the truth out there.
Yeah, I think if you look at just like politics in general this week, if you look at like some of the elections, if you look at Montana, things are on very, very shaky ground. And I feel like a lot of people are having their come to Jesus moments. And they know that this is not a long-term career goal for most people to be involved with this administration. It's not safe. It hurts their reputations. It hurts their families. And when you think about people at Fox News, like, there are a lot of women who work at Fox News, and the statistics about sexual abuse do not, discriminate against your politics. Like, there are probably a lot of women who work there who have also been sexually abused. And I hope that people feel the strength and the power to come forward. We've seen that a lot with women in Congress who have crossed political lines in order to support these women. And I would hope that that means something at some point. I don't know how long people are willing to go down with a very, very quickly sinking ship. But so far, Fox News is just all in.
They're all in. And I correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Donald Trump, has he been asked about these allegations pertaining to this 13 to 15-year-old? I don't believe he has.
I'm sure he knows about them. I'm sure he knows.
He knows. I mean, war was declared in the Middle East. It wasn't declared, but he launched a war in the Middle East like days after this NPR story. I mean,
I just can't imagine, like, if it was you or I, and we were accused of something this heinous, and we knew we hadn't done it, we wouldn't just be quiet and say that we're just innocent. You know what I mean? Like, we'd be fighting. Yeah. We'd be getting legal representation. We'd be talking. We'd be showing our emails. We'd be showing our history. We'd find a way to exonerate ourselves, not just be like, I don't care about this, I'm innocent. And you know what I mean? Like, it's just not a normal way to react to a devastating accusation. Like, that's suspicious in itself.
It's suspicious. It just doesn't sound right. It doesn't smell right. It doesn't seem right. And the other part of these latest allegations that you and Julie and many others have written about pertaining to this 13 to 15-year-old girl back in the 1980s is that it sounds as though what she alleges is that she was shared around. It wasn't just Trump, it was Epstein, it was others. And that fits the same pattern.
Yeah. It's
as the other, as what the other victims say.
Right. There are things that fit the MO, and the things that don't fit the MO, like she said, she went to a concert and Epstein was there. And that's probably not something we're used to hearing. You have to remember he's like 20 years younger. You know what I mean? He's a young financier. He's meeting people. He's growing. This idea of him even drinking, like he didn't drink later in life, but the idea of him like going to a bar and having a drink, like that could have happened when he was very young. We can't just stick with this idea of like a 55-year-old sex offender. Like at one time he was 30 years old and he was living the big life.
That's exactly right. And in the 80s, Donald Trump was obviously a much younger man, but a grown man at that point, and knew exactly what he was doing. Ellie, great to talk to you as always. Thank you so much for coming back. When I saw this story this morning that the documents had reemerged, I wanted to immediately come to you because you've just been all over these documents. And that's the thing that the Justice Department needs to understand, it seems to me, is that they can't really pull a fast one here with this stuff anymore, because there are too many people like yourself and others who are just like on the case, like you know when something's up, right?
Yeah, it's a tidal wave. It's a tidal wave of journalism. Like there's so many people out here doing so many things, so it's really cool.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ellie. Really appreciate it.
Thank you too. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
That's Ellie on Substack, The Panic Writer. And Duke has finally calmed down. Can you imagine that? Right at the end of the show, he finally calms down. So I appreciate Duke. He's worn himself out. I came home and he had this burst of energy, and he's finally settling down. So maybe I could do a final closing take at the end of what has been a really busy, crazy week yet again. And I mean, to me, we need to talk about the economic consequences of what we're seeing right now. I mean, first of all, the latest jobs numbers, like, I mean, not to bore everybody to tears with the jobs number stuff, but I just want to say, this is important stuff. The economy lost 92,000 jobs in February. Oil has hit $90 a barrel. That means, according to the experts, that we could be seeing gas prices go up by possibly a third here in the coming weeks. I mean, NBC is reporting it this way. U.S. crude oil recorded its biggest weekly gain on record, dating back to the inception of the West Texas Intermediate Oil Contract in March 1983, as the escalating Iran war threatens global energy supplies. On Friday alone, U.S. crude oil spiked more than 12% to more than $91 per barrel. That's the highest price since October of 2023. Donald Trump ran on lowering gas prices. He said he was going to lower gas prices for all Americans. And I just want to say, on the jobs front, we just, to do the compare contrast, Peter Baker with the New York Times, he put out an excellent tweet on this earlier today. I mean, he put this out there, and I think it's important. In the 13 months since Donald Trump took office, the economy has created a net total of 198,000 jobs, a net total of 198,000 jobs in 13 months since Donald Trump took office. Compare that with 1.4 million created in the last 13 months of the Biden administration. I point that out because, at the end of the Biden administration, I mean, this was written in The Economist, and I'm not here to carry Joe Biden's water or anything like that. The economy was heading in the right direction. The Economist was saying that the U.S. economy at that point was the envy of the world. And then Donald Trump comes in and he unleashes two economic policies that have been devastating for the U.S. economy. One, of course, being the tariffs, the other being the mass deportation policy. Both of those things have had a devastating economic impact. And one of the things that has saved Donald Trump's bacon is that, yes, while we do have an affordability crisis in this country and inflation has not been tamed, it has not gotten crazy out of control in terms of the inflation in this country. But ladies and gentlemen, when oil is hitting $90 a barrel, that is a problem. When gas prices start to soar at the pump, that is a problem. And what was Donald Trump elected to do? I mean, we heard about the price of eggs. We heard about the price of eggs all day long. That was something that he and others on the right were talking about. What's the price of eggs? Okay. But a lot of the time, Donald Trump was talking about what people were paying at the pump. And I just have to say, if gas prices continue to go up, if we continue to see job losses at the rate that we're seeing them right now, we've been talking about a wipeout, a blue tidal wave, a blue tsunami in the November elections. No wonder Donald Trump is contemplating trying to pull a fast one with the voters heading into these midterms. No wonder he talks about meddling in the upcoming midterm election cycle. No wonder we are seeing Republicans head for the hills, Republicans who are endangered in their districts and in their Senate seats heading for the hills. And it goes back to what I was talking about with Ellie a few moments ago, and she brought this up, and I think she made a very good point. Donald Trump is toxic right now. He's completely toxic because of the Epstein files, because of the economy in this country. He seems to think that unleashing a war in the Middle East, I mean, we could show the bombardment of Tehran this week. He seems to think that unleashing a war in the Middle East is somehow going to help his prospects, his party's prospects in the fall. Iran, one of the largest oil producers in the world. Of course, this is going to have spillover effects. And you heard at the very beginning of this program, when I was talking to retired General Mark Hertling, when I asked him, has he heard a rationale for the war in the Middle East right now, for the war against Iran right now? He said, no. No rationale for what's taking place right now. And so make no mistake, when Donald Trump does not have a rationale for what we're even doing right now, when Donald Trump is telling Time magazine about the prospect of retaliatory attacks in this country, that, oh, I guess so. Oh, I guess we might have retaliatory attacks in this country. These little metrics that we're seeing right now about where our economy stands, 98,000 jobs lost in the last month, oil hitting $90 a barrel, or 92,000 jobs lost in February, oil hitting $90 a barrel. Donald Trump is creating a dangerous world for all of us. Donald Trump is plunging the United States into a more dangerous world. And this is why you have to talk about the law of unintended consequences. This is why I'm so glad I had somebody like Mark Hertling on the program. He understands this all too well. He was, as he said, he was part of the military leadership when the United States went to war with Iraq in the 90s, in the early 90s. And there were predictions back then that you could have high casualties. Fortunately, that didn't happen. But we saw what took place a decade later when George H.W. Bush's son, George W. Bush, plunged the nation into a war in Iraq that had nothing to do with 9/11. Thousands of Americans dead, an economy that went into a tailspin. We had a financial crisis in 2008. And we had a quagmire in the Middle East. I'm at a loss as to what he thinks he's doing. Donald Trump, what do you think you are doing? We used to do this segment at the end of the show, Earth to Donald. Earth to Donald. Wake up. Oil is at 90,000, or excuse me, oil is at $90 a barrel. We're at job losses in the 90,000 range. What are you doing? You're talking about the possibility of retaliatory attacks here in the United States and saying, I guess that might happen. Like I said, some people will die, Donald Trump said. Like I said, some people will die. When you go to war, some people will die. And what's happened? What's happened to this president? Why does he think he can just talk like that to the American people? And it makes you wonder where we are headed in all of this. I don't think Donald Trump has the first clue. I don't think people on the Republican side of the aisle, well, I have to assume, are looking at these economic indicators and wringing their hands right now and starting to sweat bullets. I doubt they know what is going to happen next, what Donald Trump is up to. And so we're heading to this weekend with a great deal of uncertainty as to where we are going as a country. And it seems to me Donald Trump doesn't have the first clue. He's been calling reporters and telling reporters how great this military exercise, how this war is going in the Middle East right now. Doesn't look like it to me. And I wonder when folks are at the gas pump this weekend, what they're going to be thinking. MAGA, what were you thinking? To the folks who live in those red states, what were you thinking? You had to know if you put Donald Trump back in the Oval Office, chaos would be unleashed. He went out with a bang the last time around. He's going to go out with a boom this time around, as I like to say. And it seems to me Donald Trump not only has no rationale for why we are at war at the moment, and he has no idea how we're going to get out of this. And the economic consequences are already starting to feel very, very real. My thanks to all of you for another great week. I don't say it often enough. I'm going to say it again at the end of this show. Supporting independent media matters. If you enjoyed this program, enjoyed hearing from Mark Hertling and Ellie Leonard, these are the kind of guests that we have on a regular basis here on the Jim Acosta Show. And it makes for some really great, enriching conversations, comprehensive conversations about all of the news out there right now. And we keep doing it each and every day. And we can't do it without you. We can't do it without the support of the viewers like you. And so it does matter when you subscribe. It matters when you like. It matters when you share these episodes, whether it's on Substack or YouTube or Apple Podcasts. Any way you can help this program, it makes a huge difference. So thank you, all of you. And for the folks who do that, and I every once in a while I hear from the folks who say, I am doing this. Yes, I understand you are doing it. And please, from me and from Duke, who has finally calmed down behind me, thanks to all of you for supporting this program. It makes a huge difference. And I love the idea of being able to have on regular guests like Mark Hertling, regular guests like Ellie Leonard, folks who have become experts in their field to share with us what they know about the really important stories that are happening out there right now. And I thank all of you for supporting this program and watching each and every day. It means the world to me. It means the world to Duke, too. I'm going to go see how he's doing now that he's finally calmed down. Now I want to play. And Duke's just going to have to deal with it. He's just going to have to deal with me wanting to pick up the toy and play. But hope you guys heading into the weekend have a good weekend. Get a chance to exhale. Been a lot of crazy events this week. But take some time for yourself, your family, your friends, and the important people in your lives. Thanks so much for watching. Still reporting this time. I'm out in Utah. I'm Jim Acosta. I'll see you next time.